Call to order the regular formal meeting of the Iowa City City Council for August the 20th, 2019. Roll call, please.
Cole.
Here.
Mims. Here. Salee.
Yes.
Taylor.
Here.
Teague.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Throgmorton.
Here. So, welcome to your City Hall. It's always good to see people after a violent storm like we had last night and this morning. I don't know about y'all, but where I live, we had a lightning bolt land, I don't know, 5 feet away. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it was really close, so quite the morning. Shook our dog up, I'll tell you that. Okay, so we need to consider adoption of the consent calendar minus item 5D, which we're going to give separate consideration to. Could I have a motion to consider adoption that way?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Cole, seconded by Salee. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Item 5D, Housing Trust Fund Contribution. This is a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County for the contribution and use of $500,000 for affordable housing. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Salee, seconded by Teague. Discussion.
Yeah, I'm the one who pulled out this. I just want to say that first, I really appreciate everything that has been done by the House Trust Fund for providing affordable housing. And also, I'm very happy that, the fund continue to be $500,000 this year. And hopefully will continue for the future. But the only thing that I'm really concerned about, not like concern, I just want to add, everything here look great, but if we look at number D for the report that we receive, I just want to add another information. The report must include the following information in each project: 1, 2, 3, 4, and I just want to add number 5, which I want to know the initial rent on all the unit, because the purpose for that is I just want to know how our money has been used to reach very low income people, to really low the rent. And I think that is really a good use of the city money, but if we document it, will be great. And the information they have, it is not something that yet they have to go and calculate it or do it. It is there. I guess I need to see it on the report.
I think it's a reasonable request.
Well, we need to get a little bit of information here.
Yeah.
I wonder if anybody on staff could respond to the suggestion. And I also noticed that Ellen McCabe from the Housing Trust Fund is not present, and this is an agreement, is it not, between us and the Housing Trust Fund? So go ahead. Introduce yourself, please,
Hi,
Tracy.
this is Tracy Heishu with Neighborhood Development Services. Yes, it should be easy to report the rent, but when I say easy to report, it's the maximum rent that they can.
Yes.
So they report the maximum rent. Now, earlier your comments was, how much does it reduce it from the market?
No, I didn't.
Okay, if they're just
we will
reporting the
analyze
rent-
that as a
okay.
city.
Then I don't think that should be an issue.
Yeah.
I'm not Ellen from the Housing Trust Fund, but we can add that as a reporting requirement.
But to your point, Jim, that this is agreement between us and we are the one who giving out the money. We are the one we set the priority for them how the money should be used, and we are the one should request what information we need from them in the report. That's what I really think. This is not need to be consider. I appreciate what you said, and this is a commitment between two agencies, between us and this agency. They being great, they doing the report. That's what I think, we can ask this. This is not something difficult, and as you said, they already have the data. I'm not asking them to analyze it. I just need a figure.
Is there a timing issue with this, Tracy? I mean, Ellen's already signed this, so if we're going to make a change to it, I'm assuming we can't approve it tonight. It'd have to be deferred. Is that?
No, I think you can approve the resolution subject to that change in the in the memorandum of understanding, and then we'd have to come back to you if somehow that wasn't acceptable to the Housing Trust Fund, but otherwise, it's
So
fine.
there is no objection, as best you can tell, Tracy, and given
from
what-
staff, no.
Yeah, and given what Eleanor just said, it sounds like it's a reasonable thing to do.
Okay.
So without objection, we'll just assume that's the case. But
Well,
we
you
have-
should make an amendment to the,
You want
to
a
the
formal amendment on that?
resolution.
Could I have an amendment then to do what Eleanor just suggested? Somebody
So
make that
moved.
motion.
Second.
Moved by Teague and seconded by Soleil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we have an amended motion on the floor.
I just want to clarify, so number 5 is going to say
Initial
the
rent.
maximum, the initial rent, the maximum rent, what, I mean,
The initial rent on all unit.
initial's not maximum, so I just want clarification, so,
The initial they're gonna start with, because my understanding is maybe it will increase like next year or something like that, but the initial.
Tracy used the word maximum, so that's why I'm trying to clarify.
Typically, when they fund a unit, doesn't mean, especially if it's new construction, you won't know, the rents could change, the fair market rent. So usually what they'll report is that rent is limited to the fair market rent or some type of calculation. They can report that. If you're
Sure.
talking about the initial rent, if it's new construction, you're waiting for several months before that unit gets built, and you would,
Yeah,
rents could
no, that's
change.
okay for new construction.
So
You
whatever the
can-
agreement, they'd have no problem reporting when they enter a funding agreement with a
Yes.
nonprofit or a housing provider, the rent that's in that agreement, they can report.
That's what I mean.
So what's the language, Tracy? The initial, how should we phrase it?
The rent that was approved in the agreement, their
Yes.
funding agreement with the nonprofit or the affordable, with the housing provider. They would know like 5 units at the fair market rent or they would know that when they allocate the funds.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, any further council discussion?
I just wanted to say that oftentimes their funds can be used for gap funding in a way. And so they would be at the, sometimes abiding by the AMI. And so I really don't see any concern with them adding this figure. Like Ma said, they do have it.
Agree. Anyone else? Nope. Hearing no one, roll call, please.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. Item 8, community comment. This is a moment when anyone can speak to us about any topic that is not on the formal meeting agenda. Please come up, state your name, write it down on the form there, and take not more than 3 or 4 minutes, or at the most 5, to
My name is
tell us
Joe
what's on your
Martin.
mind.
I was here a couple weeks ago. Back again talking about that. Want to know if the city can help me get rezoned Hawkeye waste, cockroaches, rats and stuff in the yards. It can't help me. No. Is there anything the city can do?
Jeff, can you answer that, please?
We're looking at it. The issue is that the property Mr. Martin lives in is adjacent to Hawkeye Waste. So it's not like a dumpster on the property. It's the actual waste facility where they store their trucks and whatnot. So they have pest problems there, and pests don't respect property lines, and they're coming over. So we'll work with our staff to see what we can do. I'm not sure there's a great solution there, but
Is it a public health issue that could be addressed that way?
I'll have to dig into it a little bit more.
I hope you guys can help me. It's getting ridiculous. Every night I sit out and kill cockroaches, spray them. People say, why don't you spray? I said, I can't afford to spray. Landlord's supposed to do it, but he's not doing it. So I'm putting up with them. They're getting in my house and everywhere. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. Thanks for bringing it to our attention, Joe.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Hi, Ann.
Hi. I want to thank you.
Please state your name, Ann.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ann Christensen, live on Dearborn Street. I'm here to thank you partly for listening to your constituents about the climate action, and I think it's great that you've revisited that. That's only the first step, and you know that. So tonight I want to propose a very, very small step that that you may have visited a little bit earlier. Last winter, you had a visit from a group of preschoolers asking for action on plastic straws. The mayor declared a day called Day Free of Plastic Straws. I think the kids deserve better than that. Has there been any follow-up on that? I would like to see a resolution banning plastic straws in Iowa City. The states of New York, California, and Hawaii, 15 U.S. cities, and more than 32 countries have already banned plastic straws. Exceptions are made for people with disabilities. The Bluebird Cafe here in town and a few other local restaurants have stopped using plastic straws. Good for them, they should be emulated. Eliminating plastic straws will not solve the pollution of our oceans. It would have a negligible effect on the city's climate action goals. We get that. But this fight has to start somewhere. Plastics are fossil fuel products. Plastics are killing life forms on sea and land, including humans. We've all got plastics in our system now. We know the state passed legislation in 2017. It was legislation pushed by the Koch brothers, American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, preventing Iowa City or any Iowa cities from banning plastic bags. Did that include plastic straws? Has the legislature learned anything about climate crisis since 2017? Let's find out. Let's pass a resolution and let the cheap chips fall where they may. Most city straw resolutions start something like this. A restaurant shall not provide a single-use plastic straw to a consumer unless requested by the consumer. Is that too difficult? Can't we do that in Iowa City? Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Anyone else? Good evening.
Hello, I'm David Dixon. I was here a couple weeks ago and we talked about some traffic issues, and I just wanted to briefly follow up on that and maybe raise a related issue that has come to my attention in trying to gather some of the information, some of it that was presented last week that I was trying to dig a little more on. It's become clear that on a number of the city's projects, it's not clear who's signing off or approving various changes along the way. A lot of things that are engineering matters that require a stamped, signed drawing that the city is having difficulty producing. Some things that are matters of public safety, and both, as Eleanor talked about last week, issues pertaining to compliance with the law, where engineers are required to do certain things, whether it's a speed limit or, as I've included in my letter regarding the bike lanes on Clinton Street, there are specific things that are required and that aren't being done. And we've been struggling to figure out who it is that has failed to do something, or who it is that's ultimately making the decision to do something a certain way. And in that process, one of the things that became clear is that Iowa City doesn't have, or at least not that we found, a traffic engineer on staff. They have civil engineers, they have various people with various activities related to construction and utilities and everything else, but there's nobody with a traffic engineering specialty. Maybe something the city needs to look into, or at least have a common contact point for which engineer is going to carry that load of making sure that things like bike lanes and speed limits are put in place for everybody's benefit in a way that's both safe and legal. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Okay. Seeing no one else, we're going to turn to item number 10, approval of the 2019 Fair Housing Choice Study. No, I'm sorry. I flipped the wrong page. Item 9.
Can I sneak in here, or am I shooting?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay.
We're still with community comment. Please state your name.
Dawn Pulowski. And I would just like to be another voice in support of buffered bike lanes on Dodge and Governor Street. And thank you also for declaring a climate crisis. And I think the bike lanes are essential for safety, and that if we make it safer for people to travel in sustainable ways, that's in all of our best interest.
Great.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Don. Okay. Would anybody else like to address us in community comment? I'll try again then. So we're going to move on to item number 9, planning and zoning matters. Item 9A, rezoning south of Scott Boulevard and north of Tamarack Trail. This is an ordinance conditionally rezoning approximately 36.81 acres of property located south of Scott Boulevard and north of Tamarack Trail from interim development single-family residential, IDRS, to low-density single-family residential. So I will open the public hearing. Turn things over to Tracy. I'm sorry, Tracy. Danielle, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Danielle Sitzman, Neighborhood and Development Services. This is an application for rezoning tonight for the area to be called Tamarack Ridge at the time of subdivision. As a reminder, this is just the rezoning case. As you stated, it's for approximately 36.81 acres. On the map, you can see it's bounded by a largely undeveloped area. To the east is the Harvest Preserve. To the west is some land owned by ACT. And then there are existing subdivision, single-family residential neighborhoods to the south. This exhibit shows the surrounding zoning of that property. The proposed rezoning tonight is to low-density single-family district. There is another application that has been working its way through the Planning Commission and which will be on a future agenda for you, which is the preliminary plat. So just to be clear, we're not discussing the plat in depth tonight. However, my next slide will show it. They did hold a good neighbor meeting on June 10th for this rezoning. The reason I'm showing you the preliminary plat is that we are aware of it and it has informed some of the conditions that staff has crafted in reviewing the rezoning. So this is a single-family subdivision design that is, as I said, making its way to you, approximately 61 lots with one internal street. As part of the rezoning, what staff does, though, is focus on compliance with the comprehensive plan and consistency with the existing neighborhood of the land uses that are proposed. So in this case, the proposed rezoning to RS5 is consistent with the both comprehensive plan and the district plan for this area. The comprehensive plan indicates in yellow on the left there a conservation design due to the sensitive land features like slopes, woodlands, and possible archaeological resources in the area. Again, as I said, we also look at compatibility of the existing neighborhood. So as I mentioned, largely surrounded by undeveloped areas or single-family residential areas when it is. This land use would be extension of that very similar land use to the north. I mentioned environmentally sensitive areas. The rezoning tonight is not to an OPD because while there are environmentally sensitive areas, they're not proposing to exceed the requirements of our ordinance, so they don't need to ask for any waivers. There are, like I mentioned, slopes, woodlands, and potentially archaeological resources. The applicant is working with the state archaeologist to determine if any additional studies need to be conducted for the cultural resources. We do also look at traffic implications. In general, as I mentioned, this is a 60-lot single-family subdivision. Staff has estimated that the extension of Tamarack Trail has estimated capacity of the surrounding street network and the additional access point that would be provided through the development of this land eventually. We've, like I said, looked at the capacity of the surrounding arterial street network at Scott Boulevard and First Avenue. We're also aware that there are some improvements to the arterial street network outside of this subdivision planned for our 2020 CIP. We also look at design just kind of preliminarily. Again, I'm talking about plat now, but that's not the case before you tonight. We are aware that considering the existing topography, sensitive areas, and development constraints, that street connections in this area would be limited by those things. So likely street connections to the east and west would be limited, and largely would be a north-south connection reliant for the street network. So without those connections, the block length might be longer than desired, and we had some initial concerns about related to travel speeds. When you see long streets without any breaks in them for blocks, that is a concern that we evaluate. Therefore, staff did craft a recommendation to help reduce speeds. There were several design considerations that staff identified and actually are including in conditions at the rezoning with this case tonight. They include reducing the curb-to-curb roadway paving to the minimum that we can, which is 26 feet. Also requiring the incorporation of traffic circles at distances along the extension of the future north-south street, and also recommending tree planting as a way to reduce speeds along the street. Just to outline the next steps, highlighted in blue is this case tonight. Land has previously been annexed and rezoned, and now is being rezoned, as I said, to request single-family low-density development. There is an additional case coming to you. It's already been to the Planning Commission and will be on a future agenda for you. And then just as a reminder, the final plat process would be by resolution as well. So based on staff's analysis, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan, compatible and or complementary with the existing neighborhood, and will not overburden public facilities such as the surrounding street network. Staff therefore did recommend approval with some conditions to the Planning Commission. At their July 18th meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval of this case to you tonight with two conditions as proposed by staff. There have been some minor changes to those conditions from when staff initially proposed them to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission basically allowed for further negotiation with the applicant on the mechanism and timing of when tree planting would occur. What you see in your CZA in your packet is the result of that final negotiation and has been signed by the applicant. So essentially there will be tree planting required prior to the issuance of COs along the main north-south street that altered the total count of trees somewhat from what the Planning Commission initially discussed. But we have updated them at a subsequent meeting on that, and they had no further concern or comment about the number of trees. And then the second condition really deals with requiring the traffic calming design features for street width and, I should say, just traffic circles as part of the eventual preliminary plat design. As you probably saw in your packet, there have been calls and emails regarding the proposed development from the surrounding neighborhood. The applicant did notify and invite folks to that good neighbor meeting beyond the required distance requirement. Many of the concerns that are in those emails and calls relate to the preliminary plat, not so much the rezoning, but because some of the conditions tonight on the rezoning also cross over into that territory. Just wanted to point them out to you as well. There was a protest petition also filed. However, it did not meet, or to my knowledge, has not met the statutory threshold necessary to alter the City Council's vote to trigger a supermajority. So protest petition received, but not altering the requirements of the vote tonight.
That's correct, right, Eleanor? Yeah, okay.
That's what I understand.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I
This is done
believe
in
that concludes my report.
Good deal, Danielle. Thank you. So I want to ask you one question about the intersection of First Avenue and Hickory Trail. So some of the concerns expressed had to do with basically left turns from Hickory Trail onto First Avenue, especially at certain times of day when there's a lot of traffic on First Avenue. So what's the staff's view about how to ameliorate that? Is that question best addressed in the planning process, or it seems to me it's appropriate for now?
Sure. Well, Kent Ralston is here with the MPO. He can speak a little bit beyond my expertise on this if you require. We did not require a traffic study for this development. To truly answer whether there is a level of service concern at that intersection, we need to study that further. However, at this point, I don't believe that anyone on staff has concerns about that truly being a level of service issue. Again, the two streets that you mentioned, First Avenue is the arterial street and would have priority over traffic entering or exiting the other collector or local streets. So a little bit of delay to make a left turn onto a larger street is perhaps anticipated and acceptable. Again, Kent can speak to that if you need him to.
Great, thanks. Would anybody else like to ask Danielle questions?
Yeah, I have a question. You just talk about the petition that been filed. If I'm correct, I count like over 70 people filed this, and you just said you think, but you didn't say like you sure. And also, Anora said that's my understanding.
Sure.
I just really need to know how much is that. Do you know details about the threshold and?
So the petition was received on Monday morning, I believe, and they had until just now to file additional signatures. I'm not aware of any new signatures coming in. But of the signatures that we reviewed, they do not meet the threshold. So
the over 70 signature is not meeting the threshold.
Right. It depends on where you live, whether your petition is within the boundary that can file petition.
Okay.
Danielle, could you or Eleanor explain that? I think it's new information for Mazen. It would be helpful.
In order to require a supermajority of the council, there has to be protest positions by the landowners of 20% of the land within 200 feet of the property to be rezoned. So as you can imagine, there's considerable property that is not part of the neighborhood.
So it's not the number of people who sign a petition. It's
the owner. Could be like a husband and wife own one, and they sign both of them. It's not the number. It's the owner of the
property.
Like how many land that make 20%.
Right.
Of
The
area.
owners of the land that comprises 20%.
Sure. Yes.
Or more.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's a matter of state law.
Right.
Yeah.
And if there's two owners to one property, husband and wife are are they considered to be?
The owners of the property would have to sign. If they were husband and wife, they would both have to sign, but it's not
It
going
would
to.
just be considered.
It's not going to make any difference in the final calculation. It's based on the percentage of the land area.
Okay.
That people own. Yeah.
I get it. Yes.
Maybe 10 people
You
own
could-
20%.
Let's
or
say you
maybe-
have a land to be rezoned and you've got a 200-foot area. You could have 100 people owning this much and
Yes.
one person,
Sure.
it's not.
Yep. I get
And
it.
if it helps, that is the case in this circumstance. The majority of the land is owned by owners who did not sign the petition.
Okay, and we haven't received anything until now. You just said that you are not sure, but I just want to make sure. We have not received.
No, NDS typically does those calculations, and I was informed by NDS today that they do not meet the threshold, and that was not surprising to us because of the code provision.
Okay. Good
Any
to
other
know.
questions for Danielle?
I'm somewhat concerned about the density on this. It's the lowest possible density. And it's my understanding that this is going to be only single-family housing. There will not be one duplex, one quadplex. And related to that, is it possible to put a condition where there would be some more diversity of housing types?
So the land use that they're requesting, so ignore the preliminary plat that you've seen.
Yeah.
The land use that they're requesting would allow for duplexes on corner lots should they choose to, but that is not mandatory.
Okay. And we can't impose a condition to require some more duplexes?
No.
Okay.
But I think you open up a topic that we should discuss in a different way, probably at a different time.
Well, I mean, there's 60 units, I mean, and I think we can exercise our discretion, can't we, in terms of whether we want to authorize it or not, and that's a concern of mine, so.
I think the mayor's right. It's a
yeah.
question of what's allowed in your RS5 zone,
Yep. Okay.
and that's a code amendment.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So traffic speed and stuff like that, I know that there was no traffic study done. And I know you referred to Kent coming up to talk on that.
So traffic studies generally deal with the count, the generation of traffic, and the allocation of where it will be going from where it's generated. Design speed or the speed of travel speed is more about the design of the facility. And so the width of the road, whether it curves or rises and falls has more of an impact on speed. And so those are the things that we've tried to address in our conditions rather than what we did not identify as a capacity or issue with level of service.
And you talked about the Good Neighbor meeting taking place. What was can you maybe share some of the concerns?
So the comments that I summarized here were generated both at the Good Neighbor meeting and at the various planning and zoning commission meetings. So they fell into the category of whether the Tamarack Trail, the current road, should connect. Some questions about the widths of proposed lots came up at the Good Neighbor meeting when perhaps the plat was not as certain. The street trees have certainly been a topic of discussion at those later meetings, vehicle travel speeds and volumes, the left turn movements that were questioned. There's been some interest in stormwater management and how that will be finally designed. That's a detail that doesn't happen until a final plat. So there are city ordinances that are required to be met that are still being designed too. And then some questions about whether construction traffic could be routed into the neighborhood one way or another or prohibited.
And I guess my question was really, what was the greatest consensus of concern? Would it have been the traffic traveling down Hickory to First Avenue?
I haven't tallied or tried to
Sure.
quantify that, but
Sure.
my sense has been it's largely about traffic and traffic calming.
Yeah, thank you, Kent Ralston, Transportation Planner. Everything Danielle said thus far is accurate. I just wanted to add that a few things. One is that no traffic study was done at Hickory Trail and First Avenue, primarily because we don't anticipate more traffic at Hickory Trail and First Avenue. It's a little counterintuitive, but because we're adding an entire new access onto Scott Boulevard, the 60 lots that are proposed as part of the rezoning, or we anticipate to be proposed as part of the rezoning, are pale in comparison to the housing that's already on Hickory Trail. So through just a quick analysis of what we think will happen with the 60 lots, if 60% of the existing neighborhood and the new neighborhood use Hickory Trail, it'll still actually produce less traffic using Hickory Trail than it does today. You know, once you get above 60%, and I don't know how travel behaviors will occur, you know, once the development moves forward, but somewhere around the 60% threshold, you still have the same amount of traffic on Hickory Trail. 70%, it's like an extra 100 to 200 cars a day, and then it goes up from there. But assuming a 60-40 split, there'll actually be less traffic using the existing access point today than there would be after the proposed development.
Ken, do we have any traffic information of the existing conditions, such as speeds on Tamarack Trail and Hickory Trail, or volumes?
We have an estimated volume, but that was the second point I wanted to make. Was I have not seen it yet, but my understanding is our office received a traffic calming petition from the Hickory Trail neighborhood. So that's a process that we can start working through now. It's unrelated to it's related, I think, as far as the neighbors are concerned, but as far as staff's concerned, that's sort of an unrelated element, and we can start working on that traffic calming petition today and move forward with that. So that's typically, installation of speed humps is what we typically do when it comes to council because they're effective. There's thresholds that have to be met. We have not collected our own data yet. That's one of the first steps, and then we have a neighborhood meeting. But we'll start that process regardless of what happens with the proposed development.
When you mentioned that, you don't anticipate, because Scott Boulevard will be there and, residents will be using that. But if they were to take the south exit, wouldn't that be closer as far as like distance? Because a part of it is it could be like a half mile to a mile and a quarter
Yeah.
shorter
I was trying
distance
to find the-
because of the way our streets run.
I was looking for the plats to show the.
Like,
Anyway,
I
so, sorry, Mazir. So if you look at this, it's a little, north would actually be to the left side of this and the existing developments to the right side of the image. If you look at that, it's hard to anticipate what folks will do, but I would assume at least half that neighborhood closest to Scott would always be taking Scott, because otherwise it's sort of this long circuitous route down Tamarack and then through Hickory Trail, even if you are, trying to head south or head west into Iowa City. And that's sort of where we come up. I estimated this 60-40 split. It could be 70-30, it could be 50-50, whatever it is. But assuming 60-40, and that's this new traffic and the existing traffic, with a 60-40 split, 60% accessing First Avenue, 40% accessing Scott Boulevard, there would actually be less vehicles at the throat of Hickory Trail at First Avenue. Less daily vehicles. And at 70%, it adds maybe like 100 vehicles a day, which, to be honest, probably would be imperceivable to most people that live on Hickory Trail. Over the course of 24 hours, that would be like 100 vehicles a day.
So just to clarify again, consideration of the number of lots, the width of the lots, the possible cost of the homes, potential homes, extension of the trail, traffic concerns, and stormwater management wouldn't necessarily go into a decision on the rezoning?
Correct. Your decision tonight is about the use and whether additional single-family zoning is appropriate in this location.
Mm-hmm.
Kent, do you happen to have, do you recall off the top of your head what the traffic volume is on First Avenue at Hickory Trail, or at least on that stretch?
I
and,
do.
And then what the traffic volume is on Hickory Trail right now?
I do, if you would give me one moment to find my notes. Let's see, in 2018, sorry, one moment here. First Avenue had about an average daily traffic count of about 7,500 near the intersection of Hickory Trail on First Avenue. And Scott Boulevard had an average of about 5,100. Roughly near where the new Tamarack Trail would.
And Hickory Trail is?
Oh, I'm sorry. In Hickory Trail, we don't have data that we have collected, but using our estimates, it's 121 households, and they would produce roughly 1,150 trips today, give or take a few hundred, but roughly in that neck of the woods. Okay. And the proposed 60 lots would produce about 500 trips. So 570 trips or so. So you're adding half the amount of the existing traffic.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Danielle or Kent? Thanks. We might ask you to come back up. Who else would like to address us on this topic? Please come up, state your name, write it down on the paper there. Good evening.
Good evening to you all. My name is Terry Protexter, and I live on 1007 Tamarack Trail. And if I may, we have a short, if I can get the screen to close. Okay, it's the wrong computer. Okay.
Are you on the desktop?
Yeah, I'm on the desktop.
Just go to that bottom one. I think it's there. No? Okay.
Close yours. Oh, there we go. Please don't stop the clock. Start the clock yet. Oh, here we go. All right. I think that's ours. And all right. And how do we get rid of the excess? It's not my computer, so I'm sorry. I apologize for the.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And if I may, while Danielle's still up here, I wanted to clarify two things that several of you were asking. The petition for 75 citizens was a petition of people that we could contact within 24 hours before the first Planning and Zoning Committee meeting. The other thing for tonight is the protest of the zoning, which requires, and again, this is right out of city and state code. It says that 20% of the owners in the adjacent 200 feet can request that the protest. Well,
I think that's not correct. Eleanor,
It's
help
right
us
here.
out with that. It's owners of 20% or more of the property that's located adjacent to the proposed rezoning.
correct, absolutely. And there's 8 property owners, ACT, Doug Paul, which owns the preserve, and then there's 6 homes within our Tamarack Trail that abut the new development. That's 8, so 20% of 8 is actually joint.
No, it's land area. It's 20% of the, or more of the, owners of 20% or more of the property located adjacent to the proposed rezoning. It's not the number of owners, it's property.
I would defer to, obviously, the legal counsel, because there's two ways of looking at it. There's 2 ors in here. So we provided, I guess we felt, out of the 8 property owners, and it does say property owners or properties, we provided 5 people. So that was more than the necessary 20%. So we're a little surprised tonight about that. But I'll defer to the legal counsel on that. So if I may, let me just start from the beginning here a little bit. I had shared some of this background with some of the city council members earlier, and I just mentioned the 74 plus. We actually have 4 or 5 more since I put this together. We feel there's some disadvantages we have because we're losing some significant things that are part of our lives. The loss of a quiet and peaceful neighborhood. We are having increase, as mentioned earlier by the engineer, increased traffic anticipated here of that 500 cars, and I'll show you some information in just a second, and also the safety concerns for the children. And many of us built our homes in this Tamarack Trail subdivision or bought houses based on those 4 elements, peace and tranquility, if you will, for one thing. And let's see if I can maneuver to the next slide. Here we go. We do have a recommendation. I never like to come to, I used to be in business 40 years, never liked to come to a meeting without at least having offered some solutions. We do have one solution, which was rather obvious to all of us, is the idea of having no connection between our Tamarack Trail and the new subdivision. I mean, that's one approach, and there's safety and issue concerns, and I'll address that in just a second. We have actually identified several other ways that can mitigate the traffic, provide for fire and safety for both of the neighborhoods. And we would like to, and I guess our message at the bottom, is we'd like to be able to sit down with the city, the developer, and our concerned citizen group, and sit down and explore some of these other options versus just pushing the street on through. So that's our first and most important message to you. And as far as traffic and safety, that was mentioned earlier. I won't belabor that. It's 500 plus cars coming through our neighborhood. And I won't belabor the fact that there has been no comprehensive traffic study, as you folks identified in your conversations with city staff just a second ago. Our neighborhood is a straight shot, a long straight shot from the top of our hill down on a slope, and then it curves around. And our big concern is how fast cars go down. And some of the studies we've looked at, the longer the stretch of a street, the faster the cars go. Whether that's factual in our city or not, I can't say. And when people are saying a lot of the traffic will go out of the new subdivision to the north, onto Scott and out, I've lived there 23 plus years in my neighborhood. Most of us that live in that area are either going to Hy-Vee, City High for kids, Regina for kids, going over to the university, going over to the University Hospital, and going downtown for the businesses downtown. Few people are going to go up and around, and I'll show you what I mean by that. If you look at this map, and I've got it sort of color-coded for you, the route that, the green route, which would be starting from the furthest most house at 1077 Tamarack Trail in our current neighborhood. If you take that all the way up to First Avenue in Rochester, that's 1.1 miles, okay? The green line. If you look at the next option, which folks were mentioning, the city staff were mentioning earlier, if you go out to Scott Boulevard, around and down to First Avenue, if you're heading south toward First Avenue and Rochester, and then choosing which direction you're going to go from there, that's actually 1.65 miles. Somebody suggested, well, maybe people want to go all the way around Scott Boulevard and come back on Rochester to go downtown. I hardly doubt that, but I'm going back to sort of personal experience, common sense, you take the least path of resistance when traveling. You're not going to go an extra half mile between going out to the north on Scott Boulevard and then down First Avenue if you're truly heading south. So we're just using, I guess, human common sense in terms of human reaction, I should say, to what the traffic pattern will be. We're not traffic experts. We don't really claim to be. And we are concerned about fire and safety. We want to make sure that's true. But our neighborhood's been there over 30-some years, 35-plus years, with only one exit. No one seemed too excited about that over the last 30 years. And I saw the initial long-range planning that was shared earlier this evening. We've seen that before. So, you know, we're talking about traffic again for fire and safety. So I'm not going to belabor my notes here. Let me just go straight to the map, but let me hit that last bullet first. It appears to me that there was some issues with the peninsula, which never addressed. That's a single access entry point. A lot of homes in there. There's a gated street in Lexington Avenue. If you've ever driven down there, there's a huge metal gate. And our cul-de-sacs are throughout the entire community. So if we're worried about fire and safety, which I think we all should be, if you look at the green line, that would take that furthest house, 1077 Tamarack, and go out down Tamarack Trail, out on Hickory, and up on First Avenue over to the fire station, or reverse, the fire trucks coming to us. That's 1.5 miles. If you went out of the fire station in the red down to that house, it's 1.35 miles.
Terry, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
You've already gone over 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And,
So that's
within
self-explanatory.
a
Let me
moment.
just wrap up then. My point is, it's only a 5-second difference for the fire and safety folks. I'm going to skip that. Here's the references we found. These are all federal references, et cetera, et cetera. This is our message. Let's come together as a community, both the concerned citizens, as we are, 75 plus, the staff working with us, and the developer working with us. Let's come up with a good solution for connecting that street, a safe solution. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you for my time.
Anyone else? Good evening.
Hi. I can't speak and write at the same time. My name is Christy Teal. I am a recent resident of Hickory Trail. My family and I just moved there in June 19th of this year. So we didn't own the property at the time of the Good Neighbor meeting, and so we were quite surprised to hear of the plan to increase the size of the neighborhood by 50%. I am appreciative of the opportunity to speak to you tonight. And I really would like to just kind of reiterate and support many of the points that Terry just made and make 3 requests to the council. I'd like to request a traffic study to determine the impact of the traffic on First Avenue, not only from Hickory Trail and the new development on Tamarack Trail, but we also have to take into consideration that there's a new retirement community being built on Scott Boulevard as well. So that could also add to the traffic that we're not considering at this moment. As was very nicely pointed out by the gentleman here, there is no traffic engineer on staff. My second request is for a traffic study to determine if Hickory Trail and Tamarack Trail are connected to the new development. What will the impact on Hickory Trail be? I really appreciate the city staff's analysis of how to reduce traffic flow on the new development, but I would like to see those same measures applied to the existing development that it's going to be connected to. And so I think a formal traffic study would be warranted, especially in light of the fact that the council knows that there's already a request for a traffic study on Hickory Trail. And then the last request is for the street to be constructed prior to the installation of utilities to minimize the construction traffic on Hickory Trail. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christy. Welcome to Iowa City.
Thank you. Well, I've been here for 12 years,
Oh.
but new to the neighborhood.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Dick Dorsweiler, and I'm on the neighborhood council for this area. And what I would say to all of you and to our neighbors is everybody bought in an area that was known to be surrounded by Harvest Preserve and ACT. And we said, well, these are not the developer kind of thing. So there was a perception that this would be the way it would be forever. So I got a call from one of the neighbors and said, you know, they're plotting lots over here. And I said, you know, don't worry, that's ridiculous. ACT is not going to develop this land. And of course, it is being developed. It is zoned for this. It is, so, you know, we're just trying to figure out how to be smart about doing this. But part of it is the neighbors are kind of gasping because decades go by and it's just lovely and green and pastoral. So I have one technical question on how to entice traffic to not go down Hickory Trail onto Hickory Trail, but the narrowing of the street exiting onto Scott, would that be a deterrent for anyone that lives on Tamarack to go on the slower, narrower route out? Or if it was just as the rest of Tamarack is, would it be if it looks narrow and complicated leaving the neighborhood, or maybe it won't even be perceptible, but to avoid going on to Hickory Trail. The other thing to go on the Oak Knoll development is coming, and the intersection of First Avenue and Scott Boulevard. That backs up very much 8 and 5. You know, it's not too bad the rest of the time, but it really is backed up then, and ways to manage the traffic through that. If we have Oak Knoll and a full Hickory Trail, how that affects the traffic counts. And so just like to put those out there.
Thank you, Dick.
Sure.
Good evening.
John Cardos. I live at 956 Tamarack Trail. I'm going to have to turn the page, I guess. Yeah. I'd just like to point out that, to start with, that I support what Terry and Christy have told you. And we're not against the fact that there's a new development coming. That's fine. We are concerned about the safety problem. And when you think about this, and those of us who live there see this all the time, people, if you put 60 new homes on the north side there, and you ask how many of them, if they have business in Iowa City, will be going out to Scott, around to First, and then that way, the answer is not very many, because it's a further way to go. And the answer is they'll be coming down Tamarack Trail, taking the shortest way out, and you'll have an awful traffic jam, particularly at rush hours at First and Hickory Trail. So we really need to have a careful traffic study done on that, which means actually going out there and counting cars to find out what the traffic is, and to assume then how many cars might come down the hill and add to that. And I'm afraid that I don't have much faith in what's been said so far about what these numbers will be. So I would like to see that done. Another item, the matter of trees. On the current Tamarack Trail, we do not have any trees in between the sidewalks and the street. because that's where the utilities are. Now, if you suddenly have trees up on the other side of the street and it's continuous, then you're changing the look discontinuously from one side to the other. And probably that should be taken into account, particularly about where you're putting the trees with regard to the utilities. Trees have a way of finding their way into the utilities. And so those are the issues that I particularly want to emphasize and say that I generally support what the others have said. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Good evening.
Don't want to take a lot of your time. I'm Scott Rudy, and I'm at 1035 Tamarack Trail. My neighbors have done a great job of telling the story. One of the things I know is that at the end of this conversation, you're going to talk about moving it forward, of course. And one of the things we probably aren't aware of and don't understand as well, when we went to the Planning and Zoning Commission, at the end of it, they said, the only thing we do here is basically make sure it's within code and it's within the law, and so we move it on. We don't listen really to what you have to say. We're sorry, but we can't listen to what you have to say. What I really want to put forward is, when is the time? You may actually say, well, it's not our job necessarily to say whether it's rezoned or not. I mean, we're going to talk about whether it's rezoned. When is the time for the citizens to actually input? When do we have input on what happens? That's where I'm concerned. So I just wanted to make that point, put that point out there, and hopefully we can have that kind of conversation if we're moving forward.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, seeing no one else, before I close the public hearing, I want to ask council members if they are inclined to vote in accordance with the Planning and Zoning's recommendation, which was to approve the rezoning.
No.
If not, then I would continue the public hearing to allow for a consultation with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I really prefer to continue the public hearing, because I just being saying that the person even understood the petition different than what the city is saying. And I saw owner pulling up the book, and I guess they need more time at least to understand if they need to to bring more people to talk about this or not. And just because of that purpose, we just need to give the people more time to come together and give them more time to understand. I want to understand too, because I feel like it's confused. I'm a city council and it's not understand this. I don't know also the public will be like having the same feeling. That's why I really prefer to continue the public hearing.
What do the rest of you think?
I'm supportive of moving forward. I think we have to keep our focus on what rezoning is. There's lots of other concerns and issues that need to be talked about and discussed. And I think as, Pauline listed off a number of things and asked specifically that these are issues we can't really consider tonight in terms of the rezoning. Those come when we approve the plat. So to me, this is an area that fits with the comprehensive plan, is suitable use, and so I would support I will support the P&Z's recommendation.
Well, based on staff's comments, my understanding is that the issues I have concerns with, which have to do with the impacts of the project on traffic speed particularly, are not part of our decision process as it pertains to this vote. So I support the rezoning. I have serious concerns about the impacts of the project in terms of traffic.
I echo what John just said. I have a lot of concerns about this development, particularly the density and the effect on traffic, and the concern that 75 people signed this petition. We need to listen to them and listen to their concerns. That's very important as a council. But as Susan said, and as I was told, that really doesn't play into the actual rezoning of this property.
I think there's some confusion here. Rezoning is about the density. Okay, this isn't, we're talking about what rezoning we're going to impose on this property. So RS5 is our lowest density zone. That's what the request has been. So if you want to talk about density, we need to do that now. In terms of the protest petition, the code is quite clear that it is the owners of land that it comprises 20% of the area surrounding the area to be rezoned. So similarly, if there are conditions that are imposed because of needs created by the rezoning, that is something that can be dealt with at the rezoning stage. That's why the conditions have been proposed by staff in terms of the trees and the traffic circles and that kind of thing. So I don't want you to think that we're going to vote tonight and then we're going to somehow handle all these issues at the subdivision stage, because we aren't.
Well, so then my concerns with the traffic, because there are conditions that have been placed on the design of the extension, it does fall under the rezoning then.
Right. Once you close the public hearing, you cannot impose conditions. So the conditional zoning agreement has to be signed before the close of the public hearing. If there are additional conditions that you want to consider or you want to discuss, then we need to keep the public hearing open and continue it.
And John, remember at this point, all we're asking is, are you inclined to support the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation? This is the first reading of an ordinance. There will be 2 other readings.
Right, but
that includes
based on what
the
you just
conditions.
said,
Yes.
Including the conditioner.
my concerns are addressed by the conditions of the rezoning.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I would like a consult. I do not support P&Z's recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've heard from not everybody. Brockney, Bruce?
I share John and Mazahir's view. I do think we have to be, as counselors in terms of the zoning, we want to be as predictable as we can. But I think especially in this public process, we can't be too ministerial in the sense of we're making a decision. And so I want more time to talk to the residents of the community, to get feedback in terms of the density issues. I may think it might be a little higher density, so I don't know if you necessarily want that. But so I do have concerns about the density in terms of whether RS5 is appropriate here. So I do have those
but
concerns.
It's not going to be a lower density.
No, I understand that. So I would still like to have a consult with planning and zoning.
It's also consistent with the comprehensive plan. I think that's going to be your issue with density is this density is consistent with the comprehensive plan, which is really the guiding principle of a rezoning.
I know Bruce hasn't spoken yet, but I am inclined to support the commission's recommendation, and I'll explain why.
Sure. So so as far as the residential single family, because it's in line with the comp plan, although I think we need to look at that at some point. So that part, I think, is fine for me. The request of the neighbors to have the communication with developers, again, I'm not sure that we have any say in that. I would encourage all the residents to go there and knock on the door of the development and see what conversations you can have. You certainly can come to staff and have those conversations, and as well as any other counselors, as some of you have already done. So the comp plan, I'm good with that. Talking to the developers, I think you can certainly do that. I don't know that is really a counselor decision or intervene. I don't think we can intervene there. Talking to planning and zoning about, I really think that maybe we can do a condition of just the roadway.
What do you mean do a condition?
Just to have more conversation about the access and the speeds, as John has stated. So maybe, I don't know if we do a condition of I wouldn't want to totally say a traffic study, but explore like traffic patterns.
So you support the consult, Bruce, or?
Continue, yeah.
Do you support the commission's recommendation?
Is there a way to
Or
do a?
you want to have because we'll have to do a consultation with the commission.
So the question is there a way to do a condition based on the traffic?
If you believe that this rezoning is creating traffic problems, then you can address that with an appropriate condition. That's what is being recommended to you now. If you think that condition should be different, because the problems you see are different, or if you think that it needs to be conditioned on a traffic study, then that's something that you can talk about. If you want to have a conversation with the commission about that and talk to them about why they were in favor of the conditions they imposed and what they might think of the conditions that you might suggest or believe are possible, then you can do that.
So I guess for me, just to take it, straight to the punch, I am supportive of it, but with the condition, if others, support it, of a traffic study.
I wouldn't.
I think it's important to ask, what do you want to get out of the traffic study?
So I think what, John talking about speeds and as well as like Oak Knoll is going to be coming over there as well. Will that now become like a shortcut? So it is the perfect opportunity to have more traffic. Safety, we don't, I don't do traffic, I don't know traffic. And so, and Hickory Trail, I understand, is going to be having a traffic study.
I think, if with the traffic calming program, yes, we'll look at that, as Ken articulated. Staff is already doing traffic analysis at the intersection of Scott and First Avenue. In our CIP, we have funds to address that intersection. So we're already going through that process. You can spend $10,000 or require the developer to spend $10,000 on a traffic study, but we're adding 60 single-family lots. It's not that, it's not incredibly complicated. We'll know generally how many trips are going to be produced by each household. There's pretty clear standards on what those will be. There's some debate on the split that they'll take, but a traffic study is not going to, they're going to make an educated guess as well on what that split will be. So a traffic study sounds like the appropriate thing to do. We do it very rarely with rezonings, and only when we really think that there might be a significant problem that we need to get ahead of. In this case, I really don't believe spending that money or requiring the developer to spend that money is going to get you any better information than you have right now.
Okay. The one thing is that this will be like single families. I think it'll be, the price point of the houses and the type of people that will be there. I feel we'll be responsible on some level. I don't know this. So I think for me, I am going to support it because I feel like the comp plan is there. As far as the traffic, I do hear the concerns of all of the, the residents that live there. And I do understand safety, and if we're, so I'm going to support it.
Okay, so I hear 4 people indicating that they are tentatively inclined to support the commission's recommendation, which means that we are in a position now to close the public hearing. But just for the public's information, this is the first reading of an ordinance for rezoning. There will be another reading 2 weeks from now and another reading after that. So there are opportunities, frankly, to change people's minds if you want to try to do that.
But can they, just this clarification, can they bring more petitions, more people after that, after you close the public hearing?
The petitions matter at an important level of, people expressing their views. but the petitions don't matter legally for the reasons that Eleanor's already described.
No, you don't understand me. Ordinance, that's a law saying that if 20% of the area they came and present, even though if all of us agree 100%, everything there is perfect, no traffic, no anything, and we agree, but 20% came up, we have to have the supermajority, right?
There's not property owners that own enough property around there, as long as ACT doesn't sign a petition or a protest, and as long as Doug Paul doesn't sign a protest, and he actually owns this land, it is impossible to get 20%.
You mean because they own the bigger area than the residents.
It's not the percent of owners, it's the
It doesn't gonna.
the owners
not gonna
of a
matter.
percent of property.
Okay, I still want to continue the public hearing, but
Okay, so
yeah.
at this point, given the four people who are inclined to support the commission, I'm going to close the public hearing. Could I have a motion to give first consideration for this rezoning?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mim, seconded by Teague. Discussion.
Well, I'm going to support it because I believe that this does meet the comp plan. I think we have very limited land left within Iowa City proper for rezoning and for residential. We know how hard it is to find property, how expensive property is, and a lot of that has to do with supply and demand within the city. Having said that, I want the local residents to understand that I and I believe all my fellow councilors certainly understand the concerns you have about traffic and safety, and I'm interested in talking more with staff and hearing more with them in terms of what other ideas and possible solutions there are to that. I don't see within the development itself per se, and I know we're not getting into the preliminary plat, but Danielle did show us because it relates to some things. I'm not seeing a lot within there that can be done to address that particular issue. So it has to do with to me, it has to do with what other kinds of things potentially can the city do to try and address or ameliorate some of those problems. So I will support the rezoning.
Well, I'll try to explain where I'm coming from on this in terms of the traffic. I support the rezoning, but the issues I have here is that we have an existing condition. We don't know exactly what the speeds on Tamarack Trail or Hickory Hill Trail are now, but that's kind of the base condition that the residents are experiencing. And I wish it would be helpful for me to know what those speeds are, because that's kind of the baseline existing condition that, in my view, then sets the standard by which we try to evaluate how this project could impact those speeds. Because it will very possibly change them. With respect to the addition, the extension to the north, staff has recommended 2 traffic circles, if I'm not mistaken, along that stretch. And I support the idea of the traffic circles. I think they're, when you're designing a new road, I would prefer seeing traffic circles to speed humps, because you can actually integrate in the traffic calming effect rather than putting a Band-Aid on the street. My feeling is that there's spacing, if they're to function in a way similar to speed humps, which typically have a distance of roughly 300 to 500 feet between them, that standard doesn't apply to the spacing on the traffic circles. So I would prefer to see an additional traffic circle installed to establish a rhythm similar to what we would see with speed humps, to ensure that at least along that extension, the speeds are held down. The other concern I have is that there's a lot of hypothesizing here. Staff feels there'll be a 60-40 split. The residents question that. I kind of want to say, who knows? Mm-hmm. We have no idea what the split will be. I think there is a compelling argument by the residents who live there that there will be, in their view, preponderance of the additional travel will be south and exit onto, ultimately exit out onto First Avenue. So my feeling is we don't know what the impacts will be in terms of traffic volume. We do not really know what the impacts will be with respect to speed. I do think adding an additional traffic circle would help with the extension. But I would also want to add, and it was interesting to hear that there's a petition that's been filed for traffic calming on Hickory Hill Trail. My concern is that my sense is that the existing speeds on Hickory Hill Trail are lower than what the thresholds are for the traffic calming program. And so they may see an increase in speed, but it may not trigger a traffic calming project because it won't exceed the threshold on our traffic calming, to trigger traffic calming based on our program. So my feeling is that we shouldn't use if that should come to pass, that speeds increase, which we don't know, but if it should come to pass, that rather than using the standard as based on our traffic calming program, which is 30 miles per hour, I would ask as a condition that if we find speeds exceed the existing speeds, that traffic calming be implemented on Hickory Hill Trail as well.
Why don't you ask staff to provide information about existing speeds?
If we could get that between now and during our readings, that would be helpful.
I guess my question for you, John, I'm trying to understand, is the things you're asking, if I'm hearing you correctly, the things you're asking are things that we as a council can ask of staff. Did I miss, is there a specific condition that you would want to put on the rezoning? Because if there's not a condition on the rezoning,
the condition,
see what I'm saying?
the actual physical change that would be, I think, part of the conditional rezoning would be adding that third traffic circle because that affects the plat.
But that doesn't affect traffic, would not affect traffic speeds down on the southern part of Tamarack and Hickory Trail.
Correct. That's why.
And doesn't affect rezoning because you could put that in at the plat approval stage.
It's a potential impact of the project. But yes, it does not affect this project, but it locks into place the effect that the petition that has been, or the process that's currently underway of seeking traffic calming on Hickory Hill Trail, given that process, there are certain thresholds that they need to meet, which they may not meet because of the 30 mile per hour threshold that's required in order to trigger traffic calming.
I guess what I'm still not understanding, and pardon me if I'm being thick, what actual conditional zoning, what additional condition would you want to put on the rezoning that we can't just request of staff, but actually have to put in the conditional zoning agreement?
Right. Well, that, as I said, I think what would need to be added, from what I can see, is the addition of the third traffic circle, which is part of it's a revision to the condition that's there now, which talks about the traffic circles as reflected in the preliminary plat. If we change the number of traffic circles from 2 to 3, Eleanor, is this a different condition that I'm getting at? It seems to me I am.
The first condition requires substantial compliance with the preliminary plat attached, meaning it's just an example right now, that identifies traffic circles. So if that was different, then that would be a different condition.
Yeah.
If the attachment was.
And
if I could clarify, Kent, would you mind pulling up the plat, or Danielle? I think we need to look at some of the existing conditions of that property as you think about adding a condition like this, or stating that that's what you'd like to see with a preliminary plat. So the existing Tamarack Trail, and I think is shown on the plat there. And Danielle, if you could stay up there, can you circle where the end of the, just right outside the plat area, there's an existing cul-de-sac there?
I did not.
There's, Danielle, there's a laser pointer on the podium.
So there are 3 circles is what you're drawing attention
What
to.
I'm drawing to is the existing subdivision has that bulb at the end that will become a third traffic circle there. And when you look at the spacing in between there, where the cul-de-sac comes down and you've got your lots 20 through 11 there with 15 at the bulb of the cul-de-sac, as it reaches out there. That's strategically placed because that's where the topography allows for developable lots. So that traffic circle at that intersection cannot
wouldn't
move.
change.
That's going to be fixed.
That would not change.
So you're pretty limited on where you can fit third
if you could
bulb.
pull it back up, where I'm proposing would be where that cul-de-sac intersects the extension. The midpoint between the traffic circle at that intersection and the existing traffic circle is where I would be proposing.
So lots 55, 56,
Yeah,
somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
We're not traffic engineers, and I get a little concerned about us trying to put in specific traffic-related adjustments when we're not traffic engineers.
Yeah, it seems to me, if you want to make a motion to amend this thing, you should make a motion, and we can focus our attention on that.
Yeah, if that's possible.
So you
Yeah,
make your
I'd like to
motion.
make a
Well,
motion.
you,
Amend.
the conditions, the time for imposing conditions have passed. We can't make a motion to amend the conditions. The only option you have at this point is to vote down the rezoning. That's the point I was trying to make about closing the public hearing and trying to subsequently add conditions.
Okay. Would anybody else like to, offer your comments about this proposed rezoning?
So again, I think I talked about, the comp plan, it allows for this. The low-density, single-family is what we're talking about. Right now, the residents within the community does welcome that. I think the biggest concern is the traffic and the unknown of what that might look like. I do encourage residents to still go to the developers. I think you all did a great job coming up today and speaking to us here. I hear John, I think it's just that, the concern of the traffic within this neighborhood, because it will be a shortcut for anybody else, coming west on Scott Boulevard. Coming down Scott Boulevard at that point.
I don't think people on Scott are going to cut through this neighborhood.
You don't think so?
No, it's 35 miles an hour on Scott. You've got no curb cuts or anything. People typically drive over 35. I don't see anybody using this as a cut-through. I mean, I think you're going to see, and obviously it just depends on where people are headed, but I think a lot of the people north of that cul-de-sac, you probably have a fair number of them that will go out the north end. Who knows whether people are going to Cedar Rapids to work, going out to the interstate. I wouldn't hazard a guess what percentage of people are going to go.
I think you mentioned a point that I intended to bring up, and that is all the discussion so far has been about traffic that would be wanting to go downtown or in that direction. There's the interstate, and I'm willing to bet everybody in this room uses the interstate. So a substantial amount of that traffic from Tamarack is going to go north and then turn right or left in order to get to the interstate, depending on what direction they want to go. And that's not really been accounted for yet. So I think it should be.
So my position is I would like to allow the community more time to give input on this. I think my concern of the development process in general is that we're doing better with our good neighbor meetings, and I appreciate the efforts of the developer to reach out to the residents. I have not heard the residents say no under any circumstances to this particular development. I think what they said is we can make it better with the feedback. And so to me, it's always either too early or too late there's never that optimal time to address it. So until those additional contacts have been made, I am not going to support the development at this time, or
Rocky,
the rezoning.
with due respect to you and to neighbors, some of whom are good friends of mine, the only sort of happy agreement I've heard so far is to stub both ends of Tamarack so that there's no road going straight through. That's the compromise I hear people wanting us to make. And I don't see that as being a compromise. That's an either-or kind of choice.
And that would be at the platting stage.
Yeah.
At what stage?
The plat, not at the rezoning.
Right, so that's why I anticipate that at the platting stage, there's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of stuff that's been brought up today. There's going to be a lot of discussion about this because I've heard some of the residents say that they're not necessarily opposed to the rezoning and some homes being built in there, but there are several other issues that I think they have very valid concerns that need to be listened to. And if it's at that step at the platting stage, then so be it. We'll go with the rezoning, but certainly bring up these concerns at the platting stage.
Any further discussion? Well, I guess I want to say a few things additionally to what I've already said. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's come and spoken to us to express your views about this particular rezoning. It clearly matters to you, and therefore it matters to us. But the question before us is it reasonable to rezone this property from IDRS, interim development, RS, to RS5, knowing that RS5 is the lowest density residential zone in the built-up part of the city? So is it reasonable for us to do that? And then also, is it consistent with a comprehensive plan for us to do that? And it seems to me the answer is clearly yes for both of those questions. So I hear the concerns about traffic. I live on a street that has traffic too. I mean, and John, you routinely complain about traffic on Brown Street, and for good reason, but it's part of the situation we live in. And so I mentioned the traffic going up to the interstate. That will happen for a lot of people who live on Tamarack, including people who live on Hickory Trail. They might not want to go over to First Avenue and then go up. They might just go up Tamarack. And I don't know about that. But also some of the speakers said, what's wrong with the cul-de-sac at the northern end of the existing Tamarack and at the southern end of the new road? Because there are cul-de-sacs all over the city. That's true, but that was a result of prior development decisions and code, the way the code was written before. The code has been revised. It was revised, I don't know, was it that done in 2005? Was that, or Doug, maybe I should ask you, was it done in 2005?
The zoning code was 2005. I'm not sure. I think the cul-de-sac standard might be in the subdivision standards. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's true that some existing cul-de-sacs are there, but that doesn't mean we want to be building more cul-de-sacs. The answer is no, we don't want to be building more. Some people refer to the peninsula as an example of a development that it's the end of a road and there's no other way in and out except that road. That's true, but we've enabled construction of another road that will provide secondary access. And traffic congestion at First and Scott, that's been brought up. It's in our capital improvements program to do something about that intersection, either by installing traffic lights or by installing a roundabout. So I don't think there's sufficient grounds to deny the application. So I intend to vote in favor of it. But I want to introduce a couple other topics just to get them on the table, and I don't want any discussion about this. I just want you to hear them. I also think we need, at some point, to instruct staff to propose amendments to the city code that require new developments that explicitly address how they will help the city achieve its climate action and affordable housing goals. So I think this came up earlier with regard to duplexes. One of the speakers said something about that. So I don't want to get into a discussion about it. I'm just saying I think we need to point in that direction. And the item that appears next on our agenda is quite relevant to this point. We'll get to that later on. So that's my view. And
Can I ask a question?
yeah.
I really just ask Jeff because, I'm not against like the development here, and I heard a lot residents, they are not against like having more people living by them or extending their neighborhood or anything. I know that the people who concerned about the traffic on between, I guess, Hickory Hills and the Tamarack Hills, trail. Just by asking Jeff, he said, because somebody, I guess, he proposed that just don't extend that street and make the new development enter from Scott Boulevard. And now, if I understood Susan right, she said this could be discussed on the block, right? Is that true?
It can be.
I think that connection is right.
They can, during that time, today we are just approving the zoning, whether we are zoning this like the change or not, but the details, if we want to extend the street or not, or change, this is going to be later?
Can someone speak to our subdivision standards on the cul-de-sac?
Yeah, I don't think this is, maybe Danielle, if you know the maximum cul-de-sac length.
So I'm not an expert on our subdivision code, but I did take a look at it, and there are clear goals or directives that streets should connect to other streets, sidewalks to sidewalks, trails to trails, across the development and to the property line to provide for their extension to adjacent properties in the future. Each subdivision must contribute to the larger interconnected street pattern of the city to ensure street connectivity between neighborhoods, multiple travel routes resulting in the diffusion and distribution of traffic, efficient routes for public and emergency services, and to provide direct and continuous vehicular and pedestrian travel routes to neighborhood destinations. There are some dimensions about maximum length of blocks. That is the spacing of the traffic circles that you see on the plat was developed to emulate a block pattern of 600 feet, and cul-de-sacs should not exceed 900 feet in length. The existing Tamarack Trail, I think, is about 1,000 feet. The extension of Tamarack is shown here is about 1,800 feet, so those are borderline the limit, and this would clearly exceed the limit of a cul-de-sac.
Sorry, Kent Ralston, Transportation Planner. I just wanted to add one thing, too. I'm nearly certain, and I would want legal staff to look this up, but I'm nearly certain, actually, you cannot have a cul-de-sac anymore as far as the subdivision code allows, unless it meets one of, I think, 4 exceptions. And it's topographic related, which would be how this particular cul-de-sac would be allowed or permitted, is because there's no place to connect it to because of the topography and because of the neighboring properties. And there's a few others, but basically, unless, my understanding is, again, we'll have to check, but I believe it's, if you have to meet an exception, and there's like 4.
Yeah,
and topography's one, and there's other hardships about connectivity and so forth. So I don't know that you could allow a cul-de-sac unless it met one of those exceptions.
I think that's right. I'd have to look at the specific provision to verify that, but I think we all know that it would be very unusual for us to approve a preliminary and final plat that had 2 abutting cul-de-sacs when you could have a through street.
I can say with some certainty that the code frowns upon that.
Yeah. Okay, we've discussed this quite a bit now. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
No.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
No.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
No.
Motion carries 4-3. All right, so could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Teague, seconded by Mims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to item 10, approval of the 2019 Fair Housing Choice Study. This is a resolution adopting Iowa City's 2019 Fair Housing Choice Study, which acts as its analysis of impediments to fair housing choice.
Lights. No, sorry.
Lights or laser pointers?
Lights.
It's all yours, Gart.
Okay. Thanks for having me. I'm Kirk Lehman, Community Development Planner with Neighborhood Development Services. I just wanted to briefly go over the Fair Housing Choice Study, what it is, why we're doing it, and then mostly I wanted to focus on what are the recommendations found within it, what are the goals and the strategies that we're going to try and use. So generally, in terms of background, fair housing is the right to choose housing free from unlawful discrimination. So that is based on protected characteristics, or what's called protected classes. It's a number of characteristics as listed on the screen, includes age, disability, color, race, national origin, creed, religion, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, marital or familial status, presence or absence of dependents, and then also public assistance as a source of income, which does include housing choice vouchers or other vouchers of that sort. So it is guided by the Human Rights Ordinance in Iowa City, but there's also associated federal and state regulation as well. So it is the city's duty as a recipient of federal funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to affirmatively further fair housing. So that means taking meaningful actions to overcome patterns of discrimination, to promote fair housing choice, and then also to foster an inclusive community. So as part of that duty to affirmatively further fair housing within Iowa City conducts a fair housing choice study every 5 years, or what's also called an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. It provides an opportunity for the city to try to identify those impediments to fair housing choice that exist within the city, try to identify some strategies to overcome them, and then again, there's a process of implementing those actions and then also documenting all that's been done to affirmatively further fair housing. So for this study, we've been working on it approximately a year, and it's really the culmination of a set of public input processes, which included 3 public meetings, 6 focus groups, and then a public survey as well. And then also data analysis, just looking at what's happening in Iowa City, what does the census tell us, what does different federal and local private data sources tell us. So the plan has been completed around since mid-June, and we've been in a public comment period ever since. So far, we've received 4 written comments, and then we also have included in the packet those comments that were received in the public meetings that we had. In terms of general themes from that public input, the first and foremost is that housing affordability is one of the biggest barriers to fair housing choice in Iowa City. Especially with a large student population, incomes don't always match those housing costs in a high demand area, and so that can be a barrier to fair housing choice. Other concerns that were noted were displacement due to rising housing costs, discrimination generally, and then also community opposition to affordable housing can be an issue as well. Some other themes that continually came up was related to the housing stock, where the quality can be challenging sometimes for fair housing choice, where sometimes protected characteristics are experiencing higher circumstances of substandard housing, or especially cost burden. And then also in especially older areas of the city, accessibility issues can become a challenge because disability is a protected class. And then also diversity throughout neighborhoods, having different opportunities to live in different neighborhoods, whereas the opposite would be everything being the same within one area. Public policy also came up frequently, where sometimes codes and processes can increase cost or limit flexibility that are there. And then also that funding needs to be aligned with a lot of the goals that council puts forward, and that especially through the consolidated planning process and your strategic planning processes. And then coordination, just the understanding that fair housing choice is a regional circumstance, and so it can't just be solved on a jurisdictional basis. And then also the need for education within Iowa City, especially eye-opening was within the survey, 26% felt that they had experienced some form of housing discrimination in Iowa City, but only 3% filed a complaint because they didn't know what good it would do predominantly, but then also feelings of helplessness or other associated issues. So the need to educate everyone about fair housing rights and responsibilities came up as well. So towards that end, 4 different goals were developed, each with 3 or 4 strategies to try and address some of those goals, and that's what I'll just run through briefly as the rest of this presentation to kind of give you an idea of what we saw and then what we think that we can do about it. So first and foremost is improve housing choice throughout the community. This is speaking in terms of types of housing, so large families, looking at small families, looking at accessible homes, and then also in terms of price points where sometimes you can't find a lower price home within different areas of the city. And some of that is driven by need or by demand, but there's an opportunity to try and facilitate a range of housing types throughout the community. So that's the first strategy then is facilitating a range of housing types, whether that be by having different zones throughout the community and then also within zones allowing diversity of housing choice. Strategy 2 is looking at lowering the cost of housing generally. This is things like fees, on a broader sense, trying to keep people in their homes because that's one of the best ways to provide affordable housing, looking at rehab and lowering utility costs through things like energy efficiency improvements, and then also looking at alternative living arrangements for unique populations that Iowa City has, such as students. And then strategy 3 is continuing to invest in affordable housing throughout the community. So that is a strategy that you can use to guide a diversity of housing choice throughout the community. And then also strategy 4, retrofitting housing for equal access. And this is looking at the procedures that are required to retrofit a home for accessibility, for example, or also helping people age in place, age in their home, because that is overwhelmingly what people want to do. Goal 2 is looking at facilitating access to opportunity then. So this is looking at, what are the opportunity areas within the city? What are areas where there might not be as many services or amenities or what have you? And then trying to connect those as well. So the first strategy then is emphasizing a variety of housing types in areas of opportunity. So looking specifically at what's close to jobs, what's close to transit, services, other amenities, affordable childcare, and can we put a variety of housing near those things that are in high demand. Strategy 2 is kind of the flip side to having a balanced approach where you don't just want to invest everything in those areas of opportunity because they already have opportunity. So trying to turn other areas of the city that may not have that plethora of resources, et cetera, whether that be through investing in amenities, investing in housing, and that sort of thing. And then strategy 3 is enhancing those mobility linkages, whether that be transit, walkability, bikeability, to connect areas of opportunities to other areas and hopefully integrate the city better through those methods. Goal 3 is really speaking to that final point that I mentioned during the public input, which is looking to increase education and outreach. So for this, strategy 1 is looking at the demand side, and this was the most important according to the Housing Community Development Commission for this set of strategies. And that's looking at who are the users of housing, whether that be tenants, buyers, mobile home park residents. They tend to be less organized, so there's an even greater need to reach out to those folks about what are their rights and then how do they make sure that their rights are followed. Strategy 2 is the flip side of that, where there does tend to be more organization. It's people like bankers, it's industry groups, landlords, making sure that they understand their responsibilities and they understand their clients' housing rights and helping them share what are best practices, what are ways that we can continue to improve our education. Strategy 3 is regulator awareness. So that is looking at council, commissions, staff, anyone at the city that makes a lot of these decisions and making sure that we have an eye to equity as we make our decisions. And then strategy 4 is providing meaningful language access, because you can do all the education in English you want, but we do have substantial limited English proficient populations, especially Spanish and Mandarin. So looking at ways that we can make sure that they also have access to this information. And then goal 4 is improving operations or operational improvements. This is generally smaller processes within the city. It's less focused on those large themes and more what are ways that we can tweak what we're doing now to try and really further fair housing choice within Iowa City. So the first is improving fair housing enforcement and transparency. Again, many people don't know that they can file a complaint, or they don't feel safe, or they are afraid of retaliation. And so a need to help alleviate those fears, and especially tracking outcomes, making sure that we're encouraging that they report those issues that they're facing, and then also combating those fears of retaliation. Strategy 2, reviewing implementing procedures and regulations. This is really looking at what are we currently doing? What are the unintended consequences of the things that we might do in terms of equity? And then also making sure that rules are as easy to follow as possible for everyone involved. Strategy 3 is improving that regional cooperation, so making sure that we're working with neighboring jurisdictions, but also within others within the housing market region, so whether that be builders or landlords, and making sure that, or the university, making sure that they're all a part of the solution as well. And then strategy 4 is improved data collection. A lot of times with local programs, we don't always track data, so making sure that we're really tracking all that data, protected characteristics, and that we can see that we're moving forward with our goals. So in a nutshell, those are the 4 primary goals and strategies. So thank you for having me. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Thanks, Kurt. It's a very impressive study, and so I want to thank staff. I assume you played a role in this too, for producing such a thorough and informative study. Beyond that, I wonder if any of our council members have questions for you.
I wonder if you've looked at the pattern and the historical connection between single-family only zoning and socioeconomic as well as racial segregation, the link between those two, if any.
We did not look at that specifically within this study, but we did look at the zoning map and whether or not it allowed a diversity of price points in different types of homes. So some of our recommendations within the study do specifically address some of those items.
Great study, and I think, affordability is something that we've been looking at for a long time. So I appreciate the data. I do think that at some point, it'll be very helpful for us to really know how many people within our community really do need affordable housing. Some data on that, because, we have this, we know that there's a need, but we really don't have any data on how large is that need. And so, and then the other thing is, once we know how many people have that need, what type of need is it? Is it a 1-bedroom unit, 4-bedroom unit, and that type of stuff. So this was great data. I appreciate it.
I just had a question. You mentioned once the mobile home communities came up. I know that does facilitate a range of housing types, includes, and it gives a little extra option. But we're seeing recently that this population is very vulnerable. How will they fall into this, and how is there something that we could include in there that could help protect these persons?
Yeah, so as one of the things that we were looking at in policy, displacement was one of those items, and the mobile home parks really came up in that because a lot of that was coming to a head as we were looking at that. So they are included within that displacement section somewhat, but making sure that they are aware of their rights. And John McKinstry also submitted a comment that really encourages you to look at mobile home communities and how they might fit into fair housing choice within the community. That came during the public comment period, so the draft was complete at that point, but we did incorporate it into especially like the outreach and making sure that they're aware of their rights and that sort of thing.
Thank you.
I just think this is really great, the studies, and it should help us in because we identify the needs, and it should help the city on doing more toward affordable housing in the future. To Bruce's point, we do have that data. I guess we have a census data. I just saw it somewhere, but I think that there is the data that I saw last. I don't know when it was, 2018, 2008 or 2000.
Somewhere around there, and then we updated it 3-4 years ago.
And I guess it was 1,100 families who pay more than 50% of their income toward rent. And this is not include student. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about family, and that's what I saw. There is some data, there is great need. That's why we need to work on affordable housing. I appreciate the study. That will really highlight the needs too. Thank you.
Any other questions for Kurt? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to address this topic?
Charlie Eastham, 953 Canton Street. Just to respond more to Council Members Teague's comments about needing firm numbers on how many people need affordable housing. There is that information is contained in the consolidated plan. It's not necessarily in the Fair Housing Study Plan, and it's in the range that I think Mazahir just spoke.
Awesome.
That if you look at numbers of households of different numbers of members within those households, and include. There are 1,300 or 1,400 households that are spending more than half of their income for rent, which in my mind is an estimate of housing need. There are also twice that number of student households who are spending, who are also similarly cost burdened. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hello there, Austin Wu, U.S. Student Government City Liaison. This is all in approval of approving this Fair Housing Choice Study, but just a few points I'd like to make. So point one, the results of the 2018 Fair Housing Choice Study confirms what is already known by many, that a continuing lack of affordable rental housing continues to keep housing prices high, albeit to a lesser extent than before, and that discrimination on a racial and socioeconomic basis, of which I have experienced the former, continues to impact less privileged members of the Iowa City community. Point number two, landlords must be kept accountable for their actions or lack thereof. In the university rental impact area, too many landlords continue to nickel and dime tenants, often students, and neglect their properties to the point of complete loss. The demolition of Tennessee Williams' former home on Clinton Street this summer, demolished through decay, is an example of the irreversible results of such behavior, which I believe was the previous owner of the house prior to the university was Prestige Properties. To sign a lease is to sign a contract. Landlords must be held accountable to keep their end of the deal as well. And then point three is that the supply of housing in the city must continue to increase, but that alone will not be sufficient in keeping the price of housing down. Infill development, loosening restrictions on rental occupancy, and accessory dwelling units and back alleys could all serve to increase supply and density in core neighborhoods without significant alterations to the local streetscape, and that additional city investment into public housing, including into units and buildings directly operated by the city, would be crucial in supporting the most marginalized members of society, as well as keeping the aggregate cost of housing relatively low. And then finally of note, this was not on my initial notes, but I would encourage everyone to look at the late handout. There's some pretty good takes from UI students, and Guhin, at his brief recap of some of her points, she notes that more specifics are needed in regards to sustainability in the study summary, especially in light of the Council's recent declaration of a climate crisis. And she makes a very fair point that density does not necessarily equate to affordability, that expecting new construction in places such as riverfront crossings to age into affordability over time, as suggested by some market urbanist circles, is not only patronizing to the less well-off, but also takes place at an unrealistically long timeline. As an old parable goes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, could I have a motion to approve the resolution? Moved by Soy, seconded by Teague. Discussion.
It's great.
Well, I'll say something about this. Of course, I do want to thank staff for producing such a thorough and informative study. And I think we should take the study quite seriously and initiate changes in the zoning code for RS zones. Specifically, I think we should instruct staff to propose amendments to the code that require developers to ensure their proposed developments will help the city achieve its affordable housing objectives. I have one specific idea in mind, and it won't surprise any of you, I think, and that is to permit a certain percentage of duplexes and fourplexes, or maybe I should say require a certain percentage of duplexes and fourplexes that conform with missing middle concepts to permit them by right, so that the developer doesn't have to apply for a special exception or something like that. That could achieve benefits that are good from an affordable housing point of view, but also from a climate action point of view for reasons that Martha Norbeck described in an email we got from her that's part of our packet somewhere. Mm-hmm. And it really has to do with shared walls. The more you have shared walls, the greater the energy efficiency of the units are going to be, all else being equal. Yeah, so I think, duplexes and fourplexes and enhancing mobility alternatives would be very good. So at some point, I hope we do direct staff to draft an amendment to the code having to do with permitting duplexes and fourplexes, maybe triplexes, by right within single-family zones, so long as they are, I should say, within RS zones, so long as they are, what's the word I'm after here, conform with this missing middle concept, which we've discussed 1,000 times now. Okay.
Agree.
Anyone else? Any further discussion?
Good job.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Roll call, please.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 11, council liaison to the CPRB, that is the Community Police Relations Board. This is an ordinance amending Title 8 entitled Police Regulations, Chapter 8 entitled Community Police Review Board, to create a city council liaison. This is second consideration. Could I have a motion, please?
Wolf?
Second.
Moved by Soleil, seconded by Cole. Discussion. Would anybody like to address this topic? Anybody in the public? Good evening, Orville.
Good evening. Orville Townsend, 713 Whiting Avenue. You guys have kind of been wrestling with this, and, I just couldn't understand why it was such a problem. You just couldn't see it, but then it dawned on me. I think a big part of the problem is, the council, you appoint members to boards, and, and then you just leave it be. And I guess it's probably not too many times that you have a member of one of those boards that come to you with a recommendation, a suggestion like I'm doing here. The reason for it is that one of the major emphasis of our board as the city is to assure that citizens' rights aren't being violated. I know you guys have a lot of boards and you're probably a little leery about setting precedents, but I think our board is a little different because we're talking about citizens' rights. Actually, I see it as a win-win. If you approve this and it's needed, it's there. If it's never used, then that means that things are going okay. But, we're in good shape right now. We got an excellent police chief, council is kicking, but we can't guarantee that that's going to happen. Like our police chief, he's excellent, but probably somebody else is going to notice that and kind of steal him away from us. So we don't know what's going to happen. But the one thing about it is if there is a liaison appointed to our board, then that means that anytime a member has concerns, they could talk to that liaison. You appoint members to boards. I can pretty much stand my own, but you have a lot of citizens, they're not warriors. And when they have an idea and people snap at them, they kind of bury their head in the sand and just leave it be. But if they had a vehicle that they could use where they could privately communicate, they would probably do it. Another thing is, initially we said we wanted the liaison to meet with our board twice a year. We backed away from that because it's not necessary. The liaison would only, be contacted if a member had some concerns. We're not asking you to get into the board activities. We're just saying that, hey, if there's a situation where someone feels the need to communicate, doesn't feel comfortable coming before the council like I am now, they would have another vehicle to do it that would be more comfortable for them. And like I say, if we don't need it or use it, that means that things are going well. But if there's a case where we have members that do need to use it, it would be there. Not to necessarily solve grievances between board members, but basically just a vehicle for communication. And it might work out that it may just improve communication. I mean, you can't have too much communication. So I would encourage you to, approve this suggestion.
Thank you, Orville. Anyone else? All right, seeing no one else, council discussion.
Well, I approved it before, and I'll
Yeah.
support it again, and thank you, Orville, for showing up and expressing your views on it.
I also approved it before. I'm going to continue approving it, but I really would like to just talk about the city manager memo that he sent it to the council for the public information, and just telling that there is 63 complaint has been filed during the last 10 years, starting 2018 to 19, and out of the 63 complaint, only 4 of those complaint has like the CPRP had disagreed with the police chief. That's true, but the thing that I really would like to highlight it for the public, and the complaint has been filed between 2008 and 2013, was 35 complaints. None of them has been sustained, like all of them was agreeing with the police chief. And from my perspective, I'm going to tell you why. Because I joined CPRB in 2013. And during that time, before I joined even, there was like really minority, like the people of color are minority on the board. And there was a former police officer there. There is many into it. I'm expressing my own view. And I think after I joined, and we start having more people of color on the board, and I remember we have a Latino person too who was serving there. We sustained the first complaint during this 10 year, which is in 2014. Another one, 2014, like 2 in 2000. One of them February, the other one is November. And the third one is 16. And the fourth one is 17. And that's we tell you, because we have people who look like the people who complain, come on board, and now we have diversity people and start. But before that, 35, nothing has been sustained. And that, I think, my reason for why we have 4. But still, 4 out of 28 during 5 years, great job. Thank you. I'm supporting it 100%.
Anyone else?
So I've talked about this with Orville as well as a lot of, maybe a few of the counselors. So I do believe that a part of the request really is for, it's kind of twofold for me. So one is counselors historically has not gone to any of our boards and commissions. And so often people don't even know, they may know of counselors, but they don't have that interaction with the counselor. So I do see this as an opportunity to have a liaison, a person assigned, just like we're assigned to boards and ourselves, where we go to, we have assignments, just for someone to be identified, hopefully someone among the council who would say, I would like to be that person, and this is the reason why, that has police, CPRB type knowledge and history. And it's not really to go into, as Orville said, not to solve the issues between board members, but to have a private discussion with a council person. So I am in favor of it, just for to try it out, to see where does this lead. I'll be very interested in a year. Well, and we've discussed starting this January 2nd. Next next year. So I'm interested in it. I do realize that this will be, something that will be an ordinance that will essentially be the law of the land for us here. So I'm going to support it.
Well, I didn't support it last time, and since then I've sat down and met with Orville, and we had a good conversation. And when I still go back and look at the language within the ordinance, I have significant concerns about what this really means. Pauline last time quoted part of this ordinance, and I apologize if I'm repeating what she did last time, but it says facilitate communication between the members of CPRB and members of the City Council about the overall makeup and function of the CPRB. Okay? The overall makeup of the CPRB, I guess I'm not sure what that means. If members of the CPRB are trying to have influence over who the new appointees are, I guess I'm not quite sure what that is getting at. And the function of the CPRB, I think, is pretty well laid out in whatever documents establish the CPRB in the first place. And so the logic just doesn't work for me there. And the other part was allowing the council to receive information needed to be aware of concerns related to the function of the CPRB and make decisions/changes when necessary. I am not aware that once we appoint members to any of our boards or commissions, that we have any authority to get involved in making decisions or changes within that board or commission. And so to me, what this ordinance, language in this ordinance is contradictory to what our role is as a council. And so I will not be supporting it.
I'm trying, among other things, to imagine what we would do if we did appoint a liaison, and that liaison met with a member of the board or more than one member of the board, and then came to us. How, help me understand this, how would that liaison, who's a member of the council, right, how would that liaison convey to us whatever it is that she or he hears? And then beyond that, what would the board majority expect the council to do in response to whatever the council hears from the liaison? I just don't understand. So if a liaison comes and talks to John and says, John, I've got these concerns about the CPRB, about the way it's functioning, or about a member of the board, or about a couple members of the board, or about what? I don't know what else. What are you supposed to do then? Are you going to come to one of our work sessions and then say, I had this conversation, as your liaison, I had this conversation with a board member, and the board member said this and that and that? What are we supposed to do then? And then if we act, and there's a majority of the CPRB that didn't know this board member was coming to us, and then we act and tell the board to do something differently or whatever, I don't understand how that works either.
I think one of the problems is that the way we discuss it and the way it ended up being written up kind of complicated things. You know, I'm making it very simple. The liaison basically would just say, if I had a problem, okay, let me just tell you where this is coming from. When I first got on the board, we had a situation where there were a couple of people that had the mentality, we got to look out for our boys in blue. So anything that came down, they always supported the police. I mean, the policeman. We had a police chief that basically, you know, personally I felt he didn't want to deal with the issues. So as a result of that, citizens' rights were being violated, and the system wasn't working, and as a commission, as a board, we weren't working. If you read the literature there, I don't think that's the intent we had. You know, I think maybe we may want to look at just rewriting that and making it very simple. I guess I'm also a little concerned that I'm hearing you say that if the liaison came back to the council and say, look, this is a problem that's been brought to my attention, are you guys saying you can't do anything about it?
I did not say that. Or
I guess that's kind of the way I was picking up, you know.
Individually, the liaison, they can't do anything about it. Council can.
Okay.
And so a part of the.
I'm not sure what we can.
Well,
I would
He's saying
consult legal.
if the person brought this to the attention of the council, is the council going to do something about it? That would, I guess, your question, right?
I guess what I'm saying is if citizens' rights are being violated and it's brought to the attention of the council, I thought I heard you, was hearing you say you can't do anything about it.
I didn't hear you say citizens' rights being violated.
Well, this is what it's all about. Like I did say, I say, you know, when the police chief and, you know, a lot of the people on the board who are looking out for the boys in blue are voting in favor of the policemen, then obviously it's not fair. The citizens' rights are being violated. You know, the way it works is when a citizen files a complaint, the police chief looks at all the information and then writes a report saying he finds fault with it or that there is no fault. And then it comes to the board. We look at it and then we make a decision as to how we feel about it.
Can I say something?
If I could, Orville, I mean, we've heard you talk about this now. We understand your view, so and it's really important because we all love you, you know.
Yeah.
But we need to figure out what we think.
Well, you know, one of the things I would suggest is the language, the way that that's written, that is really not the way that it should be because it's too complex. You know, I think we need to take a look at maybe looking at the language the way it's written and making it a little more simple, you know. But, you know, I'm the kind of person, I believe in being realistic. Like when I see something there's a problem, like I could have came before the council. I could have came in foaming at the mouth, calling the system racist, saying that it was not fair, but that wouldn't have proved anything. It would have been a good thing for the press, but it wouldn't have been good for our city and for the, you know, what we're trying to do. So I believe in just getting in the system, working to make the system work, and it's very simple. That's just why I feel that if there's a liaison there, then you guys will have a chance to know what's going on. And if there's a problem, you can fix it.
Okay. Thanks, Whit.
I haven't been able to speak yet.
Yeah.
This year, we had a joint work session with the Citizens Police Review Board about policy recommendations, a joint work session with them. I don't necessarily know that we would have to have additional work sessions, and that obviously did not derive from a citizen liaison or a council liaison, but I would anticipate it would just be, he said, it's to consider the overall functioning of the board. Are there tweaks that could be made to make the board better, which they did just this year? Now, I don't anticipate, didn't we just have that work session 3 to 4 months ago?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're envisioning. And I think what he's getting at, as I see it, is that if the community loses confidence in this board, and that it is not function as an impartial board, or it's not achieving what we intended to achieve when the council implemented this in the 90s, that's a big problem, and we need to know about it. And to the extent people have said, well, they can talk to all of us, we have very well established protocols in terms of board members talking to individual counselors about individual issues and concerns. I mean, that is not typical. And so this would be a change from the protocol, right? That it would be that they would be able to identify one counselor that they could communicate with. That in turn, that one counselor would have some duty to hopefully communicate, and that it would be there. I don't think we have to figure out every single detail now. And this has been identified as a concern, or else the community will lose trust in this board as a functioning board. And it doesn't seem like that is the case, because we have a good functioning board at this point. But I just don't see the concern, because didn't we just do the work session this year?
Yeah.
And we changed it. And so I think it would be sort of along those same lines, except it would be more formalized.
We could do that again.
Exactly. But it would facilitate future changes. And for a long time, there were no changes. And I think that there were some problems that were not brought to the attention of the council. And there were some problems with that. So I remain supportive of it.
I think it's pretty clear from prior discussions, tell me if I'm wrong, that a majority favors the ordinance. So we probably could move ahead. I would make just one point, and it has to do with, it seems to me, Orville's got his finger on an important problem, and that is who gets not a problem, potentially an important problem. Who gets appointed to the board matters.
Of course.
Okay, but who does the appointing? The city council. So I think, the real need is to ensure that the council appoints fair-minded people who can be trusted to look for the truth and treat everybody fairly, whether the person is an officer or a complainant. That's what we need, it seems to me. And I think we have that right now. I'll take Orville's word for it that in the past that wasn't the case, at least in some instances. I don't want to globalize too much. So it seems to me that this is not the best way to solve or address the problem that Orville's drawn attention to. But I don't want to make a big deal out of it. There's a majority in favor. Why don't we just kind of find out about that and make a vote on that particular thing? We have a motion on the floor, don't we? So
I will second it, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So unless anybody else has a strong need to say something else, you mentioned something to me before.
Yes, Pauline,
Did you
right?
want to bring that point up?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. I mean, I said
Who
what I wanted to say.
Who the liaison?
Pauline haven't spoken yet.
Oh,
I guess Pauline need to speak.
I just wanted to make a quick comment because it's different than previous, because as Susan mentioned, I read that, and in reading that, I really didn't understand the intent. But after thinking about it and talking to Orville and just reading the phrase, and I think he's spot on when he says maybe it needs to be rewritten, needs to be shorter, because primarily it's the overall makeup of the board that's a concern, because that can influence decisions made by them. And people were concerned that the other boards and commissions would want a liaison also, but I think that the CPRB is trusted with kind of a unique task of things, questions that do affect a citizen's rights and sometimes have been violated, and it can affect someone's life in the long run, the decisions that are made. So I've since thought about it and thought, I think somebody brought up last time that it wouldn't hurt to try it and just see how it goes, and we wouldn't lose anything by trying it.
That's good.
Is there any interest on anybody's part in terms of making this a trial appointment for a trial period? I mean, like, a 2-year.
I guess, I don't know, Jim, but I really want to highlight something here. I being noticed that, and I being seeing you, when you are agreeing about something and you find 4 people, you will say, I think it's clear support. We have 4 people agree. And now because you are disagreeing, you want us to try it. There is a clear 5 people supporting this. Let's move.
Does anybody else have an opinion about what I just asked about?
Making it a temporary or
I think
Yeah,
let's
it's
just
like
adopt it as
a
is.
two-year trial.
Well, if it's an ordinance, it's an ordinance.
Yeah, that's it.
You would do a sunset if you wanted to do that.
I don't want to push it hard. I'm wondering if anybody would be interested in that.
5 people is enough, Kim. Let's move forward.
I don't support that, Jim.
Anyone else want to comment?
I know for me personally, I did mention, I want to do it as a trial basis, but, and I understand we can do a sunset. I think that we put it in the ordinance, and then council, whoever's here at that point, they can always figure it out from there.
Sure.
Okay, roll call, please.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
No.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
No.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-2. Okay, item 12, school speed zone, Lucas Elementary and Herbert Hoover Elementary closed. This is an ordinance amending Title IX entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Chapter 3 entitled Rules of the Road, Section 6 entitled Speed Restrictions, Subsection C entitled School Speed Zones, to create a 20-mile-per-hour school speed zone for Lucas Elementary School and to remove a school speed zone for the recently closed Herbert Hoover Elementary. This is second consideration, but staff has requested expedited action.
I move that the rule requiring the ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Taylor. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Move final adoption at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Saleh. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Throckmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Motion carries, excuse me. Motion carries 7-0. Item 13, bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters, e-skateboards. This is an ordinance amending Title IX entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Chapters 1, 3, 4, 8, and 10, to enhance bicyclist safety, to prohibit dooring, to expand the definition of electric assist bicycles, and to provide for the operation of electric scooters and electric skateboards. Again, this is second consideration, it's second consideration, but staff has requested expedited action.
I move the rule requiring the ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mem, seconded by Taylor.
Mayor,
Discussion, I understand.
Okay, before you jumped in on that vote, I just wanted to make sure that we get some public comment first.
Hi,
Hi.
please state your name.
My name is Mark Wyatt,
Thank you, Mark.
864 Foster Road. I'm also Executive Director for the Iowa Bicycle Coalition. This is one opportunity as I have where both sort of opportunities blend of being both a resident here and part of this work that's been put into this. I urge the council to take action and pass this ordinance. There's many good provisions in here that certainly can't wait any longer to be debated. This isn't a complete list of everything that we would like to see. We've done an examination of local bike ordinances across the state. We found 269 communities have them, and we found 269 versions. A lot of them developed in the 50s. And so we've been slowly working through communities. So I'm encouraged by Iowa City's action to move forward with several of these changes that we'd like to see. Some of the good provisions with the safe passing distance, it isn't everything that we want to see. We'd like to see language encouraging vehicles to change lanes when they pass. However, in Iowa City, you can't split lanes. You have to be in one lane or the other. So in a roundabout way, you're doing that. There's a definition of traffic, which I think was needed. So it contains all conveyances, including bicycles. The lights at night, in fact, I find it hard to believe that that has existed not in the Iowa City ordinances for such a long time. But having the opportunity to have lights on bikes, not just reflectors, so it's an either-or situation, I think is great. The door zone protection, especially with as many parallel parked cars are in the city, I think that's a great step. The Class 2 and 3 e-bikes, I think accurately reflects the market of bicycles being sold in bike shops currently. There is one exceptions to this. As I read this, it establishes electric bikes or electric assist bikes as their own device rather than lump them under bicycle as state code does. I'm curious as we move forward if there's any untoward effects with that. In other areas, here's the great example that we've bumped into. Certain trails say no motorized vehicles. Does the electric assist bike fall under the motorized vehicle or not? If it's defined as a bicycle, it is a bicycle, not a motorized vehicle, which would mean a different definition in the state code. How that plays out in the city ordinance, I'm not sure. There's also some missing pieces that I did want to highlight since I had the opportunity. But as I said, move forward on this part. I think what you have in front of you is good. I think that there's more work to do. I think this is a good incremental first step. The first one is crosswalk protection. I received a call a couple years ago from a young woman, and I may not have the jurisdiction completely in Iowa City because this is really on the border. Coming down from Carver Hawkeye Arena heading towards Coralville, there's a trail there. Vehicles turning right on red at Hawkins. She's hit in the crosswalk. And she wants to know why she shares the liability with the vehicle, because the vehicle in city code and in state code doesn't require anybody to yield to bicycles, just to pedestrians. So that was one of the recommendations that we had, especially since cities are building so many widened sidewalk facilities and encouraging their use by bicycles. The crosswalks, I think, is one of those liability areas that needs to be cleared up. The far to right provisions within the code, currently it's a little bit messy, aren't all codes. But currently requires vehicles be in the right lane. But if you're a slow-moving vehicle, you need to be as far to the right or as close to the right as possible, or close to the curb as possible, I believe the way it reads. Now, the bicycle isn't a slow-moving vehicle because we're not a vehicle. Vehicles can't be human-powered according to the definitions in the Iowa City Ordinance or the state code. Slow-moving vehicle isn't defined in the Iowa City Ordinance, so I'm not sure whether or not the bicycle falls in that far to the right category or not. There's a lot of exceptions that should be in the far to the right part, or it could be eliminated completely since the bicycle can just use the full lane as needed. The right arm, right turn signal is one that we've been hoping to see. Currently, the Iowa Code requires you to use your left arm to signal a right turn. Go to a bike rodeo and try to teach a 10-year-old how to do that. It's nearly impossible. They just think we're waving. They don't understand that's the direction that we're going, but we have to use this arm to do it. So I encourage that. Simple one is two abreast. Bicyclists that are traveling two abreast, which is legal in the city now, should be able to pass other bicyclists traveling two abreast. We've seen that written in other city ordinances and find that positive, and also two abreast allowed in bike lanes. Those are just parts of the model ordinance that we've developed that is being adopted in other communities. And then finally, I'll take my Iowa Bicycle Coalition hat on and do the personal one. There's many communities in many states that are adopting an exception to stop signs, allowing bicyclists to treat them as yield signs. You may have some quick opinions on that, but I urge you to do some research. The safety factor is you want people to yield. The stopping part is the procedure. But the yielding part is what we should be focusing on as an action. In the communities in the states that have done this, Idaho was one of them in 1980-something. They saw a reduction of crashes by 14%. It allowed bicyclists to use side streets much easier because momentum's a problem. If you have a stop sign every 200 feet, it makes it hard to use that side street. So focusing on the reality of bicycles are different than motor vehicles, so the law should be reflected different. Appreciate that. If you have any questions, I'll be available.
Thanks, Mark. So we have a motion on the floor to waive, waive second consideration. Council discussion?
The only clarification I think that needs to be made to the community is scooters on the sidewalks downtown. I think that information is really going to have to get out to the community as well. It's my understanding they will be treated just like bikes, correct? Okay.
Any other comment? Roll call, please.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Move final consideration at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, second by Thomas. Discussion. I want to agree with Mark about a couple of things. As a longtime bicyclist, I guess I've been riding for 30 years here in Iowa City. I agree that greater clarity is required about whether a bicyclist should be treated like a pedestrian at crosswalks. There's always been confusion about that point, at least here in our town, so I'd like to see that cleaned up. And also, I get your point about having to yield at stop signs if you're a bicyclist because you're going so slow anyhow. You can see whether vehicles are coming. And if you have to stop, you got to stop, sort of keep your balance, get your feet down, whatever, and then you have to start pedaling again. And I think it's not necessary for that. I'd like to see, personally, would like to see that particular amendment adopted, but not now, not tonight. Any other council discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Sway, seconded by Teague. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries. Item 14, community cats. You're a patient man. This is an ordinance amending Title 8 entitled Police Regulations, Chapter 4 entitled Animal Services, to establish trap, neuter, return requirements for community cats. This is second consideration, but again, staff requests expedited action.
I move that the rule requiring the ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Taylor. Discussion, please feel free. State your name, please.
Howard Wittenberg. Last council meeting, I got a chance to talk to the lady from the animal shelter after she left, and she had said that they were going to do this catch, neuter, and then release, and then if they're caught again, they might be considered as a nuisance animal and then put down. They're already a nuisance animal. That was my point at the last council meeting. They've been a nuisance animal for umpteen years, along with the private pets that are let loose. I just remember a few years ago when chickens wanted to come into town, and so many people I know were afraid these chickens were going to run loose, and now we're wanting to dump wild cats back onto the neighborhoods. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, we're breaking our own leash laws just because it's convenient to deal with these cats, or not deal with them, I guess, basically, because you're going to just leave them out there. Giving them a fancy name, community cats, I mean, doesn't make them less of a nuisance. Nobody likes to see an animal put down, but when they're a problem, if this was dogs, you had too many dogs, and a lot of them weren't fit to be adopted, I know exactly what you'd be doing with them. You'd be putting them down, just like you're killing the deer. Somebody at the last council meeting brought up the wild animals, the raccoon. And keep in mind, we moved in on their territory. I mean, them and the deer actually have more rights to be running around than these damn cats. And I just can't believe you're going to dump them back on us, and we have to put up with them again. It's like you guys aren't really solving a problem; you're just becoming part of it, And if this is what you're going to do, I guess I found 7 more neighborhoods I can relocate the ones I catch in my yard.
Thank you, Howard. Anyone else? Seeing no one, council discussion on the motion to to waive second consideration.
So move.
No, we already got a motion. Discussion is what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Hearing none, roll call, please.
Salee?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Move ordinance be finally adopted at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Thomas. Discussion.
I've supported this before, and I'm going to continue to support it. And one of the big reasons that I am supporting this is what they have told us in terms of the studies, that this actually helps to reduce the feral cat population. Because if you still have the cats there and they are neutered, obviously they're not reproducing, but you don't have other cats moving into the area, and over time, you get a reduction in that population. And so that's one of the reasons that I think it makes the most sense, that people have shown that with various studies that we've seen, so.
Any other discussion?
No.
These cats won't reproduce, but you still have the ones who, from the cat owners that are irresponsible that let their cat out in the first place, which started this whole business. You aren't doing nothing with them. And I can't believe you guys are even going to catch any. I mean, this problem has gotten this bad because the animal shelter hasn't done nothing to this point as it is. They're not going to drive around and catch them like they do dogs. It'll be up to private individuals to catch them and turn them in.
Okay.
And
thank you.
They're just going to keep on breeding the cats that they are letting loose, the tame ones, or what they call their private pets.
Thank you. Any further council discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Taylor?
Yes.
Teague?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Salee?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Sway, seconded by Cole. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Announcements of vacancies. We have one vacancy to fill an unexpired term effective upon appointment to the Parks and Recreation Commission. I'm sorry, this is item 15. And we have one vacancy to fill an unexpired term effective upon appointment to the Telecommunications Commission. Applications for those positions must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, September the 10th, 2019. We also have one vacancy to fill a 5-year term on the Airport Zoning Board of Adjustment, one vacancy to fill a 3-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission for the East College Street District, and one vacancy to fill an unexpired term effective upon appointment to the Woodlawn District of the Historic Preservation Commission. Vacancies for those positions will remain open until filled. Item 15A, announcement of new vacancies. Applicants for these positions must reside in Iowa City and be 18 years of age unless specific qualifications are stated. We have one vacancy to fill an unexpired term upon appointment to the Board of Adjustment. Applications for that position must be received by 5 p.m. Tuesday, September the 24th, 2019. Could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Slay, seconded by Mims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Community comment period. Austin, did you want to speak?
Hi again, Ms. Austin, USG City Liaison. First, I'd like to welcome Charlotte, the new deputy on board. She's just returned from many months abroad, so now she's back in Iowa City with all of us. So, welcome, Charlotte.
Charlotte's last name is?
Lankitis.
Sorry?
Lenkitis.
Caius? Can you spell it?
Oh, Lenkitis, like Lenkaitis. It rhymes with bronchitis.
Oh, okay.
Did not know.
Welcome aboard.
Okay, welcome.
So classes at the university start again next Monday, the 26th. So this week we'll see the movement of around 5,000 new Hawkeyes to Iowa City. So let us all work towards offering them a warm welcome into our city in spite of the inherent headaches associated with moving that many people in. And since we'll also have the first game this weekend as well, on Iowa, and go Hawks.
All right. Okay, which gets us to city council information. Could we start with Bruce and move to the right?
Yes, so I have no updates for this period.
Is this, what we are getting on? Just a community thing, or which one, which that's which, I don't know.
Yeah.
Council information about things you've done, please.
Okay. No, I don't have anything. I just want to tell everyone that it's something like personal. The Sudan have signed transition of military from military council from military government to civilian on the 17th last Sunday, and I guess all of the Sudanese people in Iowa City are very happy that something gonna happen, and they live on the democratic country, free of speech and everything, and now they want to see that back home. I think is happening. I just want to congratulate everyone who really work hard for that.
It's great news.
Yes, great news. That's all I have.
Jim, I don't have any updates.
Okay, John?
I don't either.
Susan?
I just piggybacking on Austin's comments, just welcome back all the students and faculty and staff to the university, and welcome the new residents. And for everybody who lives in Iowa City, watch out on the one-way streets. we don't have very many of them, but inevitably there will be the car or the truck or whoever going in the wrong direction. So be patient and be cautious, as we have a lot of new drivers in town, so there's always somebody going the wrong way.
Guess I'll make up for everybody else. Attended a number of things. One of the events was the South District Neighborhood Association meeting at the Broadway Center. They had a really good turnout. They always have speakers at every meeting. This was a League of Women Voters talking about voter registration, which that district is really important. They've got a lot of people coming and going from there and need to get them registered, and they had a good discussion afterwards. Kind of following that, a couple days later, Black Voices Project meeting. It's a very diverse group of people and individuals that attend that, and as is usually true in Iowa City, they're not shy about letting you know what's on their minds, and they're also very open to hearing whatever you have to say. Most recently, this Sunday, I saw the mayor there. Some of the others might have been there too. The Moms Demand Action event on the Pentecrest was really well attended. I would have liked to have seen a lot more people attend, because it was particularly eventful because it was held across the country, every state. And in Iowa City was selected to be the city for this event. So I would have liked to have seen a few more people there, but it was really important because the number of deaths are increasing by gunshot, and so something needs to be done. So that was a good event. Later that evening, on a lighter note, attended Summer of the Arts performance, which was rescheduled from a Friday night concert series, my favorite group, the Faz, and it was in a new location, John's Northside neighborhood. They actually, the city, thank you to the city, whoever did that, closed off Lynn Street from Bloomington to Market, and then the band set up a stage there, and there were probably 200 or more people in seats and listening to that concert. And they talked about that they might have that location again, because it turned out to work out really well for parking and seating. So that was good. That was fun. Let's see here. Upcoming Labor Day, there's the Iowa City Federation Labor picnic at City Park at noon. Everybody's always welcome, general public. There'll be music and food and probably a lot of speeches, I'm anticipating. And actually the Sunday before that, Sunday, September 1st, the Musicians Local also has a fundraiser at the Mill. It starts about noon, and that's always fun. They have 7 or 8 groups playing different sets, and that's fun. Also upcoming tomorrow is, I didn't mention, I'd gone to Iowa City Community School District meeting, and they updated on many projects, and one of which is Lincoln Elementary, which tomorrow they're having a ribbon cutting for that at 4 o'clock. So I'm anxious I haven't driven by there to see, but I've heard that it's really quite impressive. And upcoming in September in a couple weeks will be the Man one, so more information upcoming on that. That's all.
Can we start with you?
Yep, start with Bruce.
Okay, I guess that gets to me. All right, well, I attended Rob Cash's promotion to sergeant on the 12th, and that was really fun to do. Did it here in this room. He was pretty happy, as was his wife and mother-in-law and so on. You know, it's great to see families come to such events. I also want to let you know that I met with a reporter named Justin Warland of Time Magazine on the 12th, and he asked me a whole bunch of questions about our climate crisis resolution. On the 14th, I toured the town with Ottumwa Mayor Tom Lazio. That was pretty much fun. Tom's a really pleasing guy. Also, his wife somehow has a connection to Notre Dame. There you go. Happy about that. And we had a really interesting conversation, too. I learned their property tax levy is a lot higher than ours. That was a big surprise to me. I had the pleasure of taking part in the Farm to Table event on the 15th, and I want to thank Brenda Nations. Thank you, Brenda, for saying a few words on my behalf at the start, because things went awry at home for reasons I don't need to talk about, but she really stepped in. Tomorrow, you didn't mention this, I don't think, Bruce. Bruce and I are going to tape an interview about our climate crisis resolution for Ben Kiefer's River to River show, and it's going to be broadcast on Thursday at noon or at 12:30. I'm not sure which, because it'll be a half-hour interview. And tomorrow, on Thursday, which day? Tomorrow I'll also be speaking to a group at Walden Place Retirement Home. And I want to mention two other things that have relevance, more direct personal relevance to you folks, and that is I received an invitation from Joe Tiefenthaler to tour Film Scene's new facility. And I think staff and maybe some council people, I'm not sure, did that several months ago. I don't remember exactly when, but Joe has asked whether I and some other council members would like to tour the facility. So I think there would be interest. So maybe could staff kind of organize something for us? Sure. And the last thing is, it's maybe too late to ask this question. I think it's time for city government had a float in the University of Iowa's homecoming parade. Now, I don't know when homecoming is, and I don't know if we have enough time to pull this off. But
Jeff will organize it, right?
Yeah. If we do, if we have time, I'm wondering if you, my fellow council members, would support the idea of Iowa City government having a float in the homecoming parade.
Yes.
Have they ever in the past, or is this a new idea?
I don't think so.
I don't think Iowa City government's ever had a
The
float.
library's always participated.
Yeah, library.
Historically, I don't know. In my time, nobody else.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, Jeff could,
really wants to.
hang from a balloon right in front. We could tether him, and
My kids have very
Visibility,
high
I think
candy
it's great.
Like a hay wagon or
expectations. I
something.
don't know if I'm gonna.
I guess this would be fun.
So I'm hearing interest. So Jeff, could you?
We're looking at- yeah.
Somebody to look into it, see if it's possible. I don't know if maybe the slots are all full, all that kind of thing. I don't
You're not
know.
talking about this fall, are you?
I am.
Oh, you are, okay.
And
Well, I was thinking give them a little bit more time. I mean, do you have to organize? I mean, you have to.
If you want a fancy
You want a
float,
good
if you
one.
want to just
Yeah.
walk and,
Okay.
yeah.
Staff is really good.
There's usually, yeah.
I mean, I understand there might be logistics problems.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if in fact there are, next year, next
Yes.
fall, just kind of
Try your best.
get it going. Okay, there are other things I
came
can say,
out of
but it's too
nowhere.
late. All right, so I
You're gonna lead
think,
it.
Jeff, do you have anything you want to tell us? Ashley? Eleanor? Ellie? All right, so hearing nothing from you folks, could I have a motion to adjourn to the work
moved.
session, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Teague, second by Cole. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. formal meeting is adjourned.